An 11-year-old boy is lying in bed in his second-story Cleveland apartment when he hears an odd shambling noise outside the window. He gets up to look outside and sees the silhouette of a man in a fedora and overcoat on the sidewalk below. Suddenly, the man, sensing someone is watching him, jerks his head toward the boy, locking eyes with him. The boy is frightened to see what looks, at least in the shadows, like a disfigured face. Terrified, the boy jumps back from the window, hiding in the darkness of the room. He waits several minutes before working up the courage to return to the window and look again, where he sees the man, still standing in the same spot, still staring right at him. The man even now gives him a slight nod, as if to say, "Yes, I'm still looking at you." The boy looks on in scared disbelief as the man now moves toward the building's entrance, making his way for the door. The boy runs out of his bedroom, yelling for help as he can hear the man enter the building lobby and begin ascending the stairs. The boy's brother, 10 years older, grabs a baseball bat and exits the apartment to confront the would-be intruder, but the building's hallways are empty. This traumatic event, not surprisingly, stays with the boy. It is a rare but powerful encounter with horror for him. His is a strict Baptist household, and the boy has never seen a horror movie. Heck, he will not even see a non-Disney movie period until he is a young man in college. And even then, he is breaking the rules of the evangelical school he attends to take in a screening of To Kill a Mockingbird. He is transfixed by the film, sparking an overall interest in cinema that eventually is at least partly to blame, or thank, depending on your perspective, for him breaking away from the strict faith he has so far lived under. The young man goes on to earn a master's degree in writing and philosophy from Johns Hopkins University, and spends some time as an English teacher and humanities professor at New York colleges. But his growing interest in film continues to dominate his thoughts, and he makes the bold decision to leave academia to get involved in the movie industry. A far cry from his Baptist upbringing, his early work in the field consists of writing, editing, and even directing X-rated pornographic features, all under a pseudonym, of course. He will not attach his real name to a film until 1971, when his good friend Sean S. Cunningham invites him to write and direct an exploitation film that Cunningham will produce. He has still never seen a horror film, so he instead turns to the classic Ingmar Bergman revenge film The Virgin Spring for inspiration in his writing. And 1 year later, when his version, the intense, brutal, and graphically violent The Last House on the Left, is released to unprepared audiences, the world is finally formally introduced to Wes Craven. For a man who famously never saw a horror movie until he made one, Craven's name came to be synonymous with the genre, as he would follow Last House on the Left with such horror favorites as The Hills Have Eyes, The Serpent and the Rainbow, The People Under the Stairs, and the Scream movies. But of course, his most indelible contribution to horror would come in 1984, as Craven would try to resuscitate the now already waning slasher subgenre that his friend and Last House producer Sean Cunningham had gone on to kickstart with 1980's Friday the 13th. At the time, Craven wasn't really interested in the standard silent masked killer trope that had become the genre's norm. He was more intrigued by a potentially fantasy-based approach, and he would find his inspiration after reading a haunting news report in the LA Times about a young refugee survivor of the Cambodian genocide, who had been complaining to his family that he was afraid to go to sleep because he was being attacked in his dreams and was worried he would never wake up. His family was relieved when the now sleep-deprived young man finally fell asleep, but when they heard screams in the middle of the night and ran to his room, they found him dead, having apparently died in the middle of a nightmare. Craven would discover this wasn't an isolated incident, with a number of young male Southeast Asian refugees in America dying in their sleep during the early 80s. The idea of being stalked in your dreams stuck with Craven, but to bring it to cinema screens, he knew he still needed a villain to do the stalking. And then, his memory returned to that terrifying experience with the man outside his window when he was 11. A man he now rationalized was simply a homeless man gleefully delighting in terrorizing a young child because he could. This all merged in his head, a demonic killer with a sadistic sense of humor, haunting the dreams of a small town's youth. Craven's notion, when matched with an instantly iconic performance from actor Robert Englund, helped the villainous Freddy Krueger become an immediate horror superstar when he was unleashed upon the world in 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. What Craven almost certainly didn't foresee, though, was just how popular Krueger would become, as Englund would go on to reprise the character in 7 sequels and his own late 80s TV show, Freddy's Nightmares. Freddy would also star in numerous book and comic book spin-offs, and would even be heavily, and controversially, merchandised incessantly, leading to frequent debates about the appropriateness of selling children dolls based on a fictional child murderer. But much like Freddy's biggest box office rival, Jason Voorhees of the Friday the 13th series, Freddy's mega levels of popularity couldn't last forever. As the series became more and more outlandish and Freddy became more and more comedic, losing the terrifying edge he had in Craven's original, the box office results gradually diminished. And even Craven's return with 1994's meta approach, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, couldn't turn the tide. The long-awaited Freddy vs. Jason in 2003 felt like the final hurrah for both characters. But when a 2009 reboot of Friday the 13th proved very financially successful, the stage was, of course, set for a similar return to Freddy's dreamscape. There were two big questions hovering over the project, though. Could they possibly find an actor worthy to take over Robert Englund's classic portrayal of Freddy Krueger? And would the new director, whoever he may be able to reach inside themselves, pull from years of academic research and their own life experiences, and craft a nightmare as eloquent and unforgettable as Wes Craven had back in 1984? The year is 2010, and New Line Cinema, working with Michael Bay's Platinum Dunes production company, is ready to relaunch one of horror's most beloved boogeymen with A Nightmare on Elm Street. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the podcast devoted to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, bitch.
Great. Do you got enough caffeine and stuff over there? You got caffeine pills, your Jolt Cola?
Oh, absolutely. I've shot adrenaline into my chest for this.
That's good because I don't know. We haven't talked about how we both feel about the film yet, but I think
Right.
the irony of this is a movie that will be very easy to fall asleep discussing.
Very.
This is to watch. So yeah, I'm all cranked up over here. I got 3 coffees going. I got some. I actually ordered a case of Surge, bringing it back. And we are here today to talk about the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. A Nightmare on Elm Street. People forget to say the A, including me. So let me.
Yeah, same here.
A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 version. Another Platinum Dunes remake. This is technically our Halloween episode, our first Halloween episode. And I do want to just apologize to the horror community out there. Normally, I like to spend, Halloween podcasts celebrating the horror genre. And today we're talking about a film that I'm not really here to celebrate. But, it is still a part of horror history and something important to talk about, I think.
Right. No, I agree. So right off the top, we always like to say who made the film. So it's directed by Samuel Bayer. And this is his first feature film, and I think last feature film, which we will get to. It's written by Wesley Strick and Eric Heiser. And yeah, so a little bit about the budget. It was a $35 million production budget. It made $63 million domestically, and worldwide actually $115 million. So as we've said a few times in this podcast, that is quite a success. That's not terrible at all by any means. So you're probably wondering why it didn't get sequels and why it didn't go forward, which we'll get into. But as Trev mentioned in the very beginning, I think people just aren't as hot on it as they probably want it to be.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because this is kind of a double whammy for us. Because with Platinum Dunes and Nightmare on Elm Street, we're not just talking about a film that effectively ended the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but this really ended Platinum Dunes' run of horror remakes. Mm-hmm. So we talked about this in our last episode when we looked at their Friday the 13th. They were kind of on this run at this point of, Platinum Dunes came into being with their 2003 remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Then they rolled right into Amityville Horror, did The Hitcher, then Friday the 13th, and then they did Nightmare on Elm Street. And after Nightmare on Elm Street, not only do they not make any sequels to this, but they kind of go away for a few years and only come back with an original property, The Purge. Mm-hmm. And they never really returned to the remake train. And I think this film is a big part of that. So we'll certainly talk about that.
Platinum Dunes did The Purge? I completely forgot about that.
Yeah. Platinum Dunes is the entity behind The Purge. People, I think it's because they do it with it's like a co-production with Blumhouse, and I think Blumhouse gets more of the attention and the acclaim for it. But it is a Platinum Dunes property.
Okay. Cool.
So we do like to always talk up front about, why the movie happened, though, and this isn't too dissimilar from the same discussion we had with Friday the 13th. And in fact, as we mentioned in our Friday the 13th episode, that film, the 2009 version, was a huge hit. I mean, it made a lot of money. And, obviously, as we said, the two big slasher franchises of the 80s were Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, which is why you eventually culminate both of them with Freddy vs. Jason. So if you remake one and it's a big hit, it stands to reason you will, try your hand at the next one too.
Right.
And it was the same kind of deal where the original franchise had kind of petered out. They really felt like Freddy vs. Jason was an end of two eras. It was like, okay, this is like a goodbye to the original version of both of these. Mm-hmm. And so and then you have Robert Englund, who we'll mention a lot during this, because unlike Friday the 13th, where the Jason character is played by a lot of different stuntmen and actors over the run, Freddy is synonymous with the actor.
Yeah.
And in this case, Robert Englund was getting older. He had already kind of said he was ready to walk away from the character. So you really don't have too many. If you want to make a new Nightmare on Elm Street and Robert Englund no longer wants to do it, you have two options in front of you. You either try to plow ahead without Freddy, or you have to recast Freddy, of course. And if you're recasting him and there's already all these remakes happening, it just stands to reason you'll say, well, okay, let's just start over and let's reboot it. Especially since, as we said, some of the later films aren't highly regarded anyways. People felt like that original franchise really lost its way in terms of becoming more comedic, Freddy becoming more of a clown, not being scary anymore. So, there was a lot of reasons why, again, this is a case where I can look at it and objectively say, yeah, I get it. I understand this approach.
Mm-hmm. And especially after just the success of Friday the 13th. So, because I even think they wanted to have the same tactic of the, like in that one we mentioned that it was kind of an amalgamation of all the other entries in the series, and they were kind of like putting it all together, kind of like a greatest hits. Mm-hmm. This one felt like it was going to be that. It doesn't turn out to be that way. But they did want to abandon, like you had mentioned, Robert Englund being kind of more goofy near the end. They wanted to like get rid of that and just get right back to the scary of it all. Yeah,
there was a lot of talk early on from the people involved about trying to return to the feel of the first film and what they felt like Wes Craven was going for with that first movie. Mm-hmm. This is kind of maybe peeking ahead a little bit. I will say what they eventually come up across or against is that, and Chris, I can ask if you agree, I think ultimately A Nightmare on Elm Street is just a lot harder to try and replicate and do than Friday the 13th. One of the things we mentioned with Friday the 13th is essentially it's more of a comfort food kind of franchise where if you just give us Jason in a camp, murdering teens, we'll be happy for 90 minutes.
Sure.
Nightmare on Elm Street has a little bit more under the hood, so you have to like put more thought into it. And as you said, when they were originally talking about this being kind of like, well, we're definitely remaking the first film, but we're going to pull in sequences and murders from the other, entries. Yeah. It didn't sound like a bad idea. They do kind of end up going in a more just straight remake direction. And we'll talk about the pluses and minuses of that. But I do think they probably went into this, I bet, really kind of cocky because of how well Friday the 13th went. And
Definitely.
Then as they were making this one, I bet there was probably a little bit of this is tougher.
Yeah, I agree. It's not as simple as just getting Freddy to kill people in their dreams.
Well, because I mentioned in my my little audio aside last time about like why Friday the 13th is my favorite franchise, I did acknowledge that I don't think there's any singular Friday the 13th film that's as good as the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street, the Wes Craven original, is a stone cold classic for a reason. I mean, it is scary, but it's also it's got a lot of meaning to it. It's we're talking about Wes Craven has a very interesting background as like a philosophy professor, just one of the more intelligent minds in the horror genre you'll ever come across. I highly recommend going and finding every interview with him you can find of him discussing Freddy, Nightmare on Elm Street, and just horror in general. And you realize like, wow, this is someone who put a lot of thought into this, even to the point of, little things you don't think about. Freddy's sweater, the red and green sweater, that's actually, Wes Craven purposely did that because he read somewhere that those are the two colors that when they contrast together are the most hard for the human eye to deal with, is red and green. So that's why he does that.
It's a weird aside right now. So I look after all the audio while we're recording, and right now it is my name, which is in green, then it's the record button, which is in red, and then it was you in green. Isn't that interesting?
Do you think we've fallen into the dream world?
Honestly, we might be sleeping right now.
Yeah, so like I said, if you're gonna remaking Friday the 13th, it's kind of like, well, whatever. But remaking Nightmare on Elm Street, that's like the horror equivalent, or close to the horror equivalent of saying like, let's remake, a Citizen Kane or something.
Right.
It's just not to say that Nightmare on Elm Street is Citizen Kane, but in the horror genre, I'm just saying it's a little bit more revered and respected and has a little bit more behind it. So who do they ask to do this? So this is part of our opening spiel too about what the background of this film. Chris, do you want to tell us a little bit about Samuel Bayer?
Yeah, he's done hundreds of music videos and short films like that for artists over his entire career, and that makes sense. Like a lot of even highly acclaimed directors started out that way. Like David Fincher started out that way. So there's nothing against that. But Michael Bay started out that way too, right? He's all about commercials and this and that. So when they were trying to find somebody to do this, Michael Bay actually reached out to this guy, Samuel Bayer. I actually don't know why they have so much history together. I'm not sure, because it sounds like Michael Bay kind of like begged him to do it. They asked him, and he was like, "No, I don't want to do that." And then he just kept going and going and going.
And that tells you something right there, which we'll come back to, I'm sure. The fact that they had to, Bayer turned it down twice before finally being talked into it. And it even says that eventually the way he was talked into it was not like, hey, think about what you can do with this story. The final sales pitch to him was, think about what a great business opportunity this is for you, like what this will do for your name in the industry. And that's what finally convinced Samuel Bayer. And so right away, we're getting into some issues. But Samuel Bayer as a director made his name in music videos for sure. He really came onto the scene. I think maybe his first one was the Smells Like Teen Spirit video for Nirvana. And then if you go through his filmography, just tons of classic videos for artists like Garbage and Smashing Pumpkins and My Chemical Romance and various bands, and just a lot of great, he's done a lot of really good videos. But this, as you said, this was kind of the general approach at this time was to try and elevate a lot of these music video directors into feature directors. And as you said, some people were really cynical about that and would crap on that as a general idea. But Fincher, Spike Jonze, there's certainly directors who came out of that. You can say, okay, this works from time to time if those directors actually have a vision. But if you're thinking about someone who's just hired on as a business decision, a little shakier. But I believe Michael Bay even said the reason he wanted to use Bayer was he felt like Nightmare on Elm Street should have a really, kind of amazing visual look to it. And so they were definitely looking for someone who would bring the visuals more than would bring the story.
Which is also kind of ironic, but yeah.
Do you have much more to say about the background of this one? Because I feel like this one's just a little simple. Of course they made it. Why wouldn't you after the success of their other films?
Yeah, no, that's what it is. Even before the podcast, you had asked me how much research I did, and I was like, I mean, enough. But yeah, no, it sounds like it's just kind of business decision. Friday the 13th was great for them. Let's hire this guy right away. Let's get the ball rolling. And
yeah, I can only say, and this will roll into us talking about it. So I remember going to see this one opening night in the theater as well. And I think I speak for the horror fandom in general, saying I was definitely a little bit more skeptical walking into this theater than I was Friday the 13th or even Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, as I mentioned last time...
Why is that? Why would you be? Because you like those other two quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'll explain why. And I think a big part of it is the Robert Englund of it all, right? It's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Leatherface always played by different people and not too complex of a character. Friday the 13th, again, you can. I like pretty much every Jason. It doesn't really matter who's behind the mask.
Sure.
Very, very worried about a new Freddy. Open-minded. I didn't want to just be all down on it going in, and I do really like who they got to play it, and we'll talk about that. So there's a little bit of wow, I hope this works, but really kind of walking in a little bit I don't know about this, and I think also by the time this one had some kind of bad buzz kind of attached to it, even at the early stages. So going in a little bit more skeptical, hoping for the best, and we'll talk about that. I'll just say as a little preview, watching it for this show was the first time I watched it again since seeing it in the theater that opening night in 2010. So that might tell you something.
Yeah, same here actually.
having these dreams. And there's this man. And he's burned.
Don't fall asleep.
Never sleep again.
You have nothing to worry about. This won't hurt one little bit.
Following the shocking apparent suicide of their friend Dean, 4 Springwood teens discover they are all having the same nightmares of a murderous burnt man wearing... It sounds like Birdman.
No, I got it. You got it right.
Okay. I do kind of wish there was that movie, though.
Yeah. Just Michael Keaton running around.
Yeah, that's all I was thinking. Following the shocking apparent suicide of their friend Dean, 4 Springwood teens discover they are all having the same nightmares of a murderous, burnt man wearing a razor-fingered glove. Their quest to get to the bottom of this mystery is hindered by their parents, who are clearly trying to keep the kids from discovering something forgotten about their own pasts. Eventually, the truth is revealed. Their parents hunted down and killed the janitor of the preschool they all attended, who they believed was molesting their children. Now, that janitor, Freddy Krueger, has somehow come back to haunt their dreams, and if he kills you in your dream, you die in real life. You know the drill by now. In the end, it's up to the young and now sleep-deprived Nancy Holbrook and Quentin O'Grady to follow the clues to uncover their true connection to Freddy, and to rid him from their dreams before it's too late.
Well, all right. So we both said that this was our first time revisiting in a long time, and now this was one where, unlike pretty much every other movie we've covered up to this point, there's a little bit more of a question hanging over this about how we would feel about this, or at least in terms of our differing opinions. Mm-hmm. So, Chris, you were saying that you hoped that you really enjoyed this movie because you knew that I do not like it, and you were hoping for some conflict. So let me come in and ask, is that what happened? Are you a fan of the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street?
Okay, let me preface.
Because the podcast could end right here.
Okay.
This could be a friendship could end, a podcast could end.
You might actually risk COVID and fly here to beat my ass. No, okay, let me say this is quite poor. Yeah. Okay. So off the bat, it's objectively poor.
Yeah.
So it's poorly made, it's poorly written. There's a lot that is just bad with it. I will say though that like a lot of remakes that try to replicate the original classic, it's shooting itself in the foot right away because you're constantly being reminded of what was better. Now, having said that, if there was no first Nightmare on Elm Street, maybe this would be better in some respect. Do you see what I'm trying to get to?
It is interesting because as I was rewatching it this time, I actually was trying to do that. I was trying to think of it in that objective form of saying, well, what if this was the only Nightmare on Elm Street film? Mm-hmm. It still wouldn't be good, but would it be hated on the same level? And I think you're right that probably not. I mean,
no, it definitely not.
It would be like another bad horror movie, right? It would be like The Bye-Bye Man or something. It would just be something people would see like, all right, whatever. You know, and,
kind of
kind of
schlocky, kind of just like whatever. And people would think about it for about 20 minutes and then it's over with.
Yeah, because a lot of my biggest criticisms come from, well, think about how they really dropped the ball on this as related to the original franchise.
Exactly. So like that's what I mean. Like it's a terrible Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but as a horror movie, it's fine to bad.
I'd say it's a bad horror movie and a terrible Nightmare on Elm Street film. That's what.
That's fair. I would actually agree with that. Because like I wonder how just hell, I would say how young people would feel about it today in 2020 if, you know, some 17-year-olds would go see this movie. You know, would they like it? Like, probably, right?
Well, but that's the thing. I think that's telling in that, unlike some of these other remakes, which did catch on to a younger audience, you know, and so that was like a big fear of the horror community. I think we talked about this last time. The kind of gatekeepers in the horror community who don't like these remakes, and never want to acknowledge that this is the introduction to horror for a lot of, you know, the generations below us. And you see, like, there are people who, to them, the remakes of Dawn of the Dead and Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those are their versions. You know, that's really what they caught on to. And I don't feel like that even happened with this. I don't think this even gained like a young audience. I mean, as we said, it made a lot of money, but of course it was going to.
Do you think if like this thing premiered on Netflix nowadays, like it would just, I mean, mind you, no, never mind. It would just
bad
be,
example.
It would
be forgotten by the week too.
Yeah, it'd be exactly. Yeah, 100%. Never mind.
No, I just think there's some inherent problems with the film itself that kind of prevent even that from happening.
Well, it's interesting too because, you know, when doing a little bit of the research, right, and hearing what the filmmakers were saying, they wanted to make, you know, they really. I know Robert Englund kind of gave it his blessing as much as he could, right? He was like, you know, like, go nuts. You know, I'm retired. Have fun with it, you know? And he was really interested in them exploring the dream space, or dreamscape, sorry. Just, you know, especially with now modern day filmmaking techniques, you know, CGI and this and that. Like, the world is our oyster now, you know what I mean? Like, you could do whatever the fuck you want on screen now. And at a $35 million budget, that's a pretty nice chunk that they can do. You know, everybody that was hired on was fairly unknowns. Hell, this was Rooney Mara's first big role, right?
Yeah, first lead role, I think.
First lead role, yeah. So, you know, they're not spending a lot of cash on the cast, nor the filmmaker, really. But you'd think that they'd want to, you know, reinvent the character for a new generation, you know, do some visuals, make it just pop. You know, like, you know, I know in the first A Nightmare on Elm Street, you know how you do notice how I'm trying to really drop the A Nightmare on Elm Street, by the way. I just want to make sure everybody remembers. There's some iconic imagery. You know, there's the glove in the bath, moving up to Nancy, or the Johnny Depp exploding into just a fountain of blood. Like, those things
the tongue coming out of the phone.
Absolutely.
The marshmallow stairs. Like,
yeah. The final kill with the mom getting you know, ripped through the door.
Or a mannequin of a mom, but that's okay.
That's true. And a noticeable, obvious mannequin. But, you know, like, there's some really, I mean, at the time, what was it, 84?
Yeah.
Or 84. Those are some visually arresting stuff. So now in 2010, you're probably like, oh my God, they could do fucking everything. Which they do not do, which is, like, so disappointing in the movie. It didn't make any sense why they weren't doing anything super cool like that.
That was, like, walking out of the theater, that was ultimately, like, my first most, like, that was, like, the thing that probably bothered me the most. Was just thinking, wow, you had, like, this was what everyone was expecting you to do with New Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, a remake would be justified if you're saying, hey, we have the money now to kind of create these incredible dream landscapes, you know, these like fantasy worlds. And instead, most of the dreams are in Freddy's boiler room, which we've seen a lot before.
Yeah.
Or it's just in, you know, someone's house or in the classroom. There's a couple cool visuals. We'll talk about them. But yeah, for having that amount of money to not try and really push this franchise in a fantasy realm that it never was able to do before. And actually, I think it, like, some of the cheaper ones from the original series do have more interesting dream landscapes.
Definitely.
And do really cool stuff than this one does. And beyond that, I'll also say, I'll just get this out of the way now. I think this is an ugly film. Like, visually.
Very.
So it's kind of amazing to me that you get someone like Samuel Bayer, who is known for doing these kind of very visually arresting music videos. And I just think this film is, like, not pleasant to look at.
No.
There's nothing captivating about the visual style. It's all dark, like overly dark. It's just so dull and like, I don't know. It's just so disappointing.
This you know, looking at the timeline too of when it came out and when it was in production, and then, like, reading about how there was we've talked about this a few times. So there's a little movie that came out in 2008, and it's called The Dark Knight. And for better or for worse, really changed filmmaking. And this feels like they took all the wrong lessons from that movie. because I know even Bear had said that he made it known on the set and everything. Like, we really wanted to make this like Dark Knighty. You know what I mean? Like, and it's this weird Dark Knight syndrome that has happened ever since 2008, and that it's to go for grit, realism, make it real that Freddy. And I'm just like, you're talking about some fucking nightmare demon. You know what I mean? Like it really makes no sense. Why do I need that to be grounded in my reality when the movie is about being outside of reality?
Yeah, I read a number of interviews with Samuel Bayer, like leading up to the release of this, and every time he's questioned about like, well, how much are you going to push the dream world in this? That was kind of his go-to response. He's saying, I wanted to make sure that even though you can get as fantastical as possible, we wanted to always have this like kind of grounded in realism. And you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Why? What do you do? What are you talking about? Like, no, like you're remaking in a 2010 version of Nightmare on Elm Street. The dreams should be like Lord of the Rings or something.
Yeah,
just, like,
absolutely.
Totally go all out. And I think part of that just, obviously they wanted to make, they're trying to make a very like darker tone and thematic version of Freddy 2, which we'll get into. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a middle ground there that they could have explored more that they were too hesitant to do.
Yeah, like I understand the course correction. Like, the Freddy series was getting progressively goofier and goofier, but except for New Nightmare, which people seem to forget that already did try to course correct it. Yeah, it's just like the pendulum swung way too far to the grit and the darkness. And like you said, it's really ugly. It's really, really ugly. Like, it's so strange that you can barely even see Freddy when you see him.
Mm-hmm. Well,
sorry?
There might be like a benefit to that because the Freddy look isn't that great either, but I want to save that for a little bit.
Okay, fair enough.
I will say, so if like we'll start kind of systematically going through some of our notes and stuff about the film.
Sure,
I will say, to its credit, and I remember this even the first time I saw it, I'm actually kind of on board for the first 10 or 15 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm,
I think
definitely.
the opening sequence is actually pretty strong. So we open in like this. Well, first of all, we have our generic. Every film of this decade had like 7-ish open credits, right? Where it's just got that look to it. Not surprising at all. Mm-hmm. But the opening sequence is in a diner, and this is actually kind of the one part of the film that I would actually say. Well, there's one other one, but this is the one of the two that I would say visually kind of looks cool. Like the diner is lit in all neon light. Mm-hmm. And it's actually a very economical opening sequence in that all of our main characters are introduced in this opening.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I would say it's worth watching as like on a screenwriting level, because you could say it's cheap, and I don't disagree. But for a movie like this, it actually works very well in that every character kind of comes in and then says the name of another character and says just a little bit about them to where you get like in about 5 minutes, you know who all these people are, and you know already what their like interpersonal relationships are, where they're all coming from, why this couple's not together anymore. It sets everything up kind of perfectly. And then it culminates on a fairly good, like, it's not like an amazing visual death, but the way it's played works well for this series. So I was like, okay, that opener works pretty well. I'll give it up for that.
And it's also interesting too because it almost feels like an obvious suicide. Like the guy grabs a knife and he sticks it in his neck and he slits his own neck in front of this girl and all the diners, right? And right before the title screen. But it's something that I thought like maybe I expected that like it was going to be more suicide type things, which would blur the line of like, is it actually Freddy or stuff, you know what I mean? Like for the kids to even question it a little bit more than they even do in the movie.
Well, let's talk about that because I think that let's just get that out of the way because.
Sure.
I think you're right. So that's a big complaint of mine as well, in that this opener sets up a great story idea that the film does not commit to.
No.
And that is this idea that you could then, throughout this film, play it as, well, are these kids just killing themselves?
Yeah.
And the reason that would work is because the big story change this time is that they go all in on this idea that, so in the original franchise, Freddy Krueger was a child murderer. He was a child murderer that was caught, but due to some problems with the warrant or whatever, he was released. And then the parents of Springwood formed a vigilante mob, went to the boiler room where he worked, set him on fire, and then he years later comes back as a dream demon to kill their kids again as revenge. Mm-hmm. This version changes the story to where he is a caretaker or like a handyman at a preschool that all these kids went to, and he was molesting all the children. Yeah. And the parents found out about it, and same idea, they form a vigilante band, kill him. And now he's coming back. In the meantime, we're watching all these kids that he molested as our main characters, but the parents have done their best to make the kids forget that.
Right.
by giving them drugs or just putting them into therapy or whatever. None of these kids remember this. And so Freddy, if this was done well, and I know this is what they say they're going for, it's this idea of Freddy being this like buried subconscious, this terrible thing happened to you coming back and affecting the kids. And this idea of like, if these kids start killing themselves, you could actually have this reckoning of the parents being like, ooh, did we make a mistake in how we handle this? Are the repressed memories coming back and affecting our kids?
Yep.
But the movie drops that pretty quickly. And the whole molester thing, we'll talk more about it because it really causes a lot of problems with this film and the narrative. But yeah, it sucks that you can, every time this film raises like some cool, interesting idea, it sucks because you're like, oh, that's neat. And then it's just dropped almost immediately.
And that's maybe where I can give the movie a little bit more benefit than you can, being so far removed from the old movies, is that these little glimpses of something special or interesting stick with me a little bit better. But like you said, it just drops the ball immediately. It's so strange because, and okay, everyone, I hate rewriting movies. I just fucking hate it. I hate that as a criticism. It drives me nuts. But something about even the point of this podcast forces us to do so, which has been fun. But this is kind of one of those moments where it's so smart and easy, and it's right there in front of you that the repressed memories are coming out, and then these kids are killing themselves. It's right there.
Yeah, well, this is a film. This is certainly going to be true of a lot of movies we'll talk about over the course of this show. This is a film that you watch and you see different creative minds at combat with one another. Because I think whenever you're seeing these interesting ideas raised, you can just tell, oh, these are the remnants of a probably better initial script.
Definitely.
And we can talk about that briefly. So the original writer was Wesley Strick, who was hired to write it because he had impressed New Line and Platinum Dunes with a prequel to Seven that he had written, which thankfully was not made because I don't think anybody needs or wants a prequel to Seven.
No.
But the script was good enough that he was brought on to write this. Then his version was given to Eric Hessier, who rewrote it. And by the time Bayer comes involved, the script that he is handed is like basically a combination of the two of them. So it's credited to the two of them, as it is finally in the final credits as well. I believe that script, the Strick Hessier draft, is what the cast is given and what they sign on to. In fact, I know it because I'll read some stuff in a second here. But Bayer comes on and does a rewrite of it, which becomes the shooting script. And I think a lot of the problems lie in that. I am going to put most of the blame for the failure of this film on Samuel Bayer. I don't, it's not often you pick a certain person to really be the scapegoat. I have no problem this time. I have no problem in this podcast throwing Samuel Bayer under the bus for many reasons, and I will start here.
Okay.
So the cast has talked quite a bit about this, and the writers have talked about this. So later on, years later, in a lot of deconstructions of what went wrong here, there's an interview with Wesley Strick and Eric Hessier where they talk about their original idea. It says, Wesley Strick and Eric Hessier have revealed that their original idea was nothing like what Bayer went with. In fact, it was so much more disturbing. Speaking to Bloody Disgusting, the writers said they wanted the reboot to be a twisted version of The Goonies in order to beef up the fact that psycho slasher Freddy Krueger was a child molester. They explained, we thought it would have been a great idea for the remake to switch the teenagers of the original with real kids. Our idea of a good remake is to have a new vision on the same thematics. Here it was to really use the fact that Krueger's a child molester. See, the idea was to have a twisted version of the Goonies with a bunch of little kids being stalked. So that's pretty intense. I'm not surprised the studio didn't go with that.
Yeah.
But I kind of do agree that that's an interesting idea. So obviously they don't go with that. But then, years later, again, one of the writers, I'm trying to see which one it is here, Eric Hessier, he's talking about his how he feels his script was completely butchered by Samuel Bayer. And I'm just going to read some of this. He says, "Oh man, what a lesson for me in first movies made. I wish the script I'd written with the two New Line execs as shepherds would have been the movie. The draft that we thought was going to be shot was different in many ways, some big and some subtle. This happens a lot, but I still have memories of arriving to set and recognizing nothing from the script on the shooting schedule." So he gives some examples of that which aren't super important. But then even, you can find the actor Kyle Gallner, who plays Quentin. He says, the script that I was sent originally was a lot different and much darker than the script I was given when I got to Chicago to actually shoot. It was the movie I thought we were going to make. I'm assuming that was the Hessier version. I really liked that version. I was pretty surprised when I sat down in my hotel room the night I got there and read the new draft. That was quite an interesting shoot, that one. I wish there was a world where Hessier's version also existed. It would have been cool to see that up on the screen.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, this is like this reminded me of our Super Mario Brothers discussion where the cast showed up and was just like, wait, what is this script? You know?
Yeah. Well, just like Super Mario Bros, it's funny how these actors will come out after the fact and they're talking about their movie and what they felt like doing it, what they felt like making it in that respect. But Rooney Mara, we had mentioned before, this is her first title role, leading lady role. And she was pretty dismissive about the movie in general. Hell, even the audition and pre-production of it all, she didn't even want this movie. Mm-hmm. And it's so strange to me that, I would say Rooney Mara's not a big star now, but, she's at least somewhat of a name. But she did an interview with Entertainment Weekly, and she said she didn't even want the role and even wanted to sabotage her chances of getting it. This is a quote from her. "You kind of learn to self-sabotage with things you don't want to get. Sometimes you don't want to get something, but you do a really good job and you get it in anyway. That's kind of what happened with Nightmare on Elm Street. I didn't even really want it. And then I went into the audition and I was like, fuck, I definitely got that." So, kind of shitty that she didn't want the role and she gets it. And you can kind of tell in the movie. I'm just going to jump off into her performance, if you don't mind.
Well, I just want to add, because there's a second part to that quote, I don't know if you saw it too,
yeah,
where she does say, and this rolls into what I know you're about to say. She says, I didn't want to act anymore. I was like, this isn't what I signed up for. If this is what my opportunities are going to be like, then I'm not interested in acting. So I was very discouraged and disheartened. So tell us about how that appears on screen.
Yeah, she might be, how do you explain, one of the most boring, meandering, dull performances that I've ever seen.
It's pretty interesting to watch this lead performance and think that she goes on to, be a pretty acclaimed actress after this. Because she's about as boring as it gets as a heroine in this.
You'd think that watching a movie like this, if you put a performance like she did, she would never work again. Mm-hmm. It's like one of those types of moments. It's just very... There's a scene where she... There's a scene where she's sitting in a car and Quentin, the other protagonist, has to run into the store. And she can't fall asleep, right? Like, they're on to Freddy, And she's like, I can't fall asleep. I have to stay awake. So, but, Quentin's away, and she's sitting in the car. So you know what she does? She realizes, oh, there's a lighter in this car. So she puts the lighter in, and she's heating it up. And you're like, oh, man, she's going to burn herself, like, to keep her awake. And I was like, that's going to be fucking gross, and yada, yada. She burns herself, and she barely emotes. And it's such a strange thing to see that she does some self-mutilation and she doesn't scream, she doesn't internalize it. She's just like Bayer was like, okay, Rooney, now put the lighter on your arm and look like it hurts a little bit more, a little bit. Oh, that's all we're gonna get. Moving on. Check the gate. Let's go. And it's that's when I really realized, I was like, oh man, she does not want to be in this movie. She doesn't want to be on set. She just does not want to be here. Period.
Yeah, there's two elements to this for me, I think, because it's certainly just she's not really putting her all into it. I will also say, though, so I'm going to keep returning to this idea of changing Freddy into a flat-out child molester.
Sure.
Because there's various things about that I think affect this movie. Mm-hmm. And one of them is that ultimately, because now you're dealing with a film that's about these repressed memories and these kids who went through something very traumatic and now, coming to grips with it, it gives the whole film this, like, morose, ugly, depressing vibe, which does not allow these kids to be energetic and charismatic. Now, I know that, like, I'm not sure if this is even a fair criticism, because I think if you were making a movie about this, it's not like I think they should be cracking jokes and stuff. Of course not. I think the approach they're taking is right. Mm-hmm. But it does have a byproduct of meaning it's not fun to watch.
No.
And for whatever, like the original Nightmare on Elm Street and other films like it, they're scary, they are intense, they do have deep meaning, but they're still fun, and the kids are likable. And these kids can't really be likable because you're just watching them deal with such gross trauma. Mm-hmm. And like that really works against them. I will say I think some of them combat it a little bit better. Like I do think there are good performances in this. I really think Kyle Gallner is really good in this as Quentin. Mm-hmm. I think he's like someone who you look at is like really trying to like rise above the material. But she is just definitely like she's got this double whammy of having to play up a version of Nancy that is completely insular and withdrawn. Yeah. Unlike the Heather Langenkamp version. So I'm going to say something that might be heresy to some horror fans.
Oh, get ready.
I don't think Heather Langenkamp's performance in the first Nightmare on Elm Street is that great, really. I think you can see that she's an up and coming actor. It's kind of an amateurish performance. Mm-hmm. She still comes out of that film as one of the best final girls of all time, because she has this natural likability and charisma that overcomes like what she lacks in acting skill, you know, and also the way the character is written. You're really on her side, and there's this whole like kind of thematic idea of this like coming of age story for this character and overcoming fear. And the last act is just such a triumphant moment for her. I will say, I do think Heather Langenkamp becomes much better as she goes along, and I think her performance in New Nightmare is great. Yeah. So that's really cool too, as you track the character and the actress, and she gets better and better in the 3 she appears in. But yeah, this version of Nancy is just like she's
dull.
She's dull, and I think this is where we get to the thing where their desire to stay true to the original Nightmare on Elm Street, as you said, shoots themselves in the foot. Because subverting expectations is something people make fun of a lot, right?
Right.
I think there's an awesome opportunity to do that here that would have benefited the film, in that they do what the original film does. So for people who remember the original Nightmare on Elm Street, they set up Tina as if she's going to be the main character. And then the end of the first act is Tina getting killed. And suddenly the perspective switches to to Nancy. Mm-hmm. And they basically do that again in this one, where they set up Chris, played by Katie Cassidy, as the main character, and then she dies, and then again we move over to Nancy, because that's what everyone's expecting, though, right?
Right.
I just think they should have stuck with Chris, because I think Katie Cassidy actually is like much more charismatic on screen. I think she just like pops more. I would have been probably more involved or invested in the film if it just stuck with her. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Like, without a doubt, she's probably the best part of the movie. Mm-hmm. Like, she's giving it her all, and she has a great death scene. She has some of the best visuals are actually revolving around her.
Yeah. And she played like her fear, like the.
Oh, it's real.
I mean, yeah.
Like she's got a great scream. Like, you know how like she's really, really good in it. Mm-hmm. Again, it's kind of a low bar in the movie in general, but she does have actually a really good job. There was a weird thing that I felt though regarding her, is that they kind of just like figure out everything within like 20 minutes of the movie, and they just kind of. That was weird. Like, the mystery just kind of happens out of nowhere, but it's because they're relying on the knowledge of the old movies. Did you ever get that feeling? Like, I had checked the time when Chris and her ex-boyfriend are talking, and she's immediately like, yeah, there's this Freddy guy, and he's, they just figure it out that, oh, he's killing me in my dreams, and it was just so quick. I can't really remember. Does that happen in the first movie like that? Do they just kind of figure it out, like, just right away?
It's not too dissimilar, but I think it plays out better in the original. I do think one thing I noticed watching this yesterday is that this is only a 90-minute movie. It really does race by. I'll give it that, which is good, because you don't want to spend any more time with it.
Sure.
But this is one of those films, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because you know it when you see it. This is a film that feels like it's racing to the end. Like it's tired of itself, and it just wants to wrap up. And yeah, the mystery is really hurt by that, because they just they do figure out everything very fast, and it doesn't tease out anything.
No.
And it really is just like, okay, let's just get to the next part. We just got to wrap this up. And that's like a disservice to it too. But you're right. Like, it's very early on where they're just like, yeah, he's in all of our dreams, and if you die in the dream, you die in real life. You're like, oh, okay, I guess that's the case. But they feel like they can get away with it because we as the audience know that too. But you're right, it is a cheat somewhat.
That was one of my. You just said the line that I thought was really silly, was that they actually ADR that line in. If you die in your dreams, you die for real. And it was like so obvious. And I'm sitting there being like, did I not understand that yet? Like, obviously I get that. Like, why are we telling everybody this? Like, the characters actually understand that already. The audience understands that already. But it's, like you said, it's racing to something. It's got to just tell you everything. Just tell you, this is what it is, guys, and we'll get to the end and that sort of thing, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not to say there's no good ideas in this. So let's give credit where credit is due. Like I said, I do like the opener. And again, maybe some of this comes from who knows who came up with this. I doubt it was Bear, just because I want to keep crapping on him. But it does introduce the idea of a new cool wrinkle into the Nightmare on Elm Street mythology. And
actually, I'll tell you who said it. It was a Heiserer. He developed it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's the micronaps. Mm-hmm. The micronaps are a very cool idea. So an ongoing thing in the franchise has been this idea that the teenagers obviously figure out what's happening to them, and they try to stay awake as long as they can. And this film brings in the idea of micronaps, which I'm assuming is probably something real, maybe. I don't know. Does he say, like, is this something he actually researched, or?
I think so. I think it has a little bit of it. I think it might be a little bit of a cheat, though.
Yeah. But it's basically an idea that, if you stay awake, like, over a certain amount of time, obviously your body kind of goes into a defensive system, and your brain starts essentially shutting down on you and doing these things called micronaps, where you're basically sleeping and not even realizing it.
Well, it says nightmares are triggered by the belief that the dreamer has no control, and this can cause insomnia. But then it says at the 70-hour mark, the insomniac will begin to experience micronaps. His brain will begin to shut down its functions for several seconds in an attempt to recharge itself. This basically means that you're dreaming, but you don't know it. Like, even if you're awake.
And that's a cool idea because it obviously makes this a lot scarier, to where you could just be, you can be driving, as we see in the film, you can be, in a store, and suddenly your brain just shuts you off, puts you into like a coma-like state, essentially, and then suddenly you're stuck with Freddy in his world. And I will say the other sequence I really like in this is a moment with Nancy in a pharmacy, falling into these micronaps, falling in and out of them.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool, like, visual moment where the pharmacy keeps changing to the boiler room as she's, going in and out of the dream world, and Freddy, of course, blinking in and out of existence and slashing at her. I love that. Film doesn't do very much with it again, but that's like a cool idea. So it's like one of those things where you're like, man, I wish that was in the movie more. I wish that could even be the central conceit of the film, because it's such a good idea.
You mentioned, again, we're talking about micronaps, and before you had talked about some quotes from Hezerer. Am I saying his name? Like what is it?
It's Heiserer. I would think.
Heiserer? Okay, so Heiser. What's his first name? What was it again?
Eric.
Eric. So we're going to say Eric. So Eric was talking about, again, those script changes, right? And this part I really loved. Now that we've mentioned micronaps, I'm gonna tell you the quote. One of the New Line guys and I worked hard to sidestep tropes in the script. An example: Freddy appearing while two characters are driving in a car. The trope we've seen 1,000 times is Freddy standing in the middle of the road and they have to swerve. Let's be smarter. And we were. He can appear anywhere, and we have the advantage that you don't know which of these two are dreaming, the driver or the passenger. So we had Freddy rise up in the back seat, taunt Quentin, who's driving, as he gores Nancy through the chair, blood spraying the windshield, Nancy screaming at Quentin, "Wake up!" And he snaps to realize he drifted off while driving, and the two crash the car into a tree. Now they both have concussions to complicate matters when they realize the way to kill him is to fall asleep and then wake up once they have hold of Freddy. But then they got to set, and it's just, nope, that's not what it is. Freddy's standing in the middle of the road. And it just makes no sense. So I read that quote, and I'm like, man, that's so sweet. Freddy, that's one thing that is kind of really lost on this movie, going back to the performance of Freddy, or no, the character of Freddy. I would say the performance is fine, but the character of Freddy is that he's not really taunting these kids. You know what I mean? Like, he's not as much as maybe he should be, because doesn't he live on fear? Doesn't he want them to be scared? Doesn't he want to be? He's lacking in that aspect. And again, I don't want to get too wrapped up in comparing it to the original, because that was kind of my point in the beginning, was that's the reason why we don't like it a lot of the time. But him sitting in the backseat of the car and taunting the driver is like so sweet, right? Like, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, no, let's hold off on the performance. I think we should actually culminate with talking about Jackie Earle Haley. Sure. But I think you're right in that the thematics of the character are lost in this, because, as you said, I do love that idea in the original of how Freddy is symbolic of fear. Yeah. And that's what I meant. So, like, the end feels very cathartic because you're watching a young lady, like, overcome fear. And, like, you even have the moment, like, the way she defeats Freddy in the original film is by turning her back on him and saying, "I don't give you this power anymore. I'm not afraid of you." And it's the matter. And it's even like, you push that further into realizing she understands he's a real threat, but she still says, even though I know that, I'm still not afraid. And that ultimately is like what defeats him. And so he can't do anything to her because he's lost his power. And then that's a through line that runs throughout the films, where if the kids in the town are no longer afraid of him, he can't do anything. He can't even get back into their dream world. He's really symbolic of nothing in this. He's just a child molester. And I think, again, so here we go again. Like, so I'm there's like so many things that revelation ruins. And it's that if you take away the fear element, first of all, the ending is just so much more simple. It's just watching them kind of like pull him into the real world and beat him up. There's not much more to it. It's the end feels very rushed. But it also creates all these questions about him as a character. So, for instance,
all these kids are like the little kids that he supposedly loved, right? The whole thing was he was molesting them because in his twisted mind, he's in love with them. Okay, so why is this version of Freddy now killing them and not killing the parents that killed him?
Yeah.
Because the original version makes sense. He was always a child murderer. So now he's coming back to, once again, kill the children of the town as revenge for what they did to him. In this, you would think like, well, okay, first of all, he's presented to us, here's another thing. In the original, I know we're comparing, but in the original, he's always this like twisted person that was a child murderer. So the dream version of him is just a continuation of that. In this, he's like this simple-minded, like, child molester who becomes this like wisecracking serial killer after death.
Yeah.
And he's like targeting the kids, which makes no sense. You also have to ask, why did a child molester have a razor glove? If he's no longer a child murderer, why is he wearing something that would leave scratches on the kids and leave physical evidence of what he's doing? So it's just like they thought of this idea. And to be fair, what they're pulling from is that was the original idea of the first film. That's how Wes Craven originally wrote it, was that Freddy Krueger was a child molester.
Right.
He ended up changing it because at the time that they were making the movie, there was like a real rash of child molestation cases in the news in LA, I believe, and he didn't want to be seen as exploiting that. And so they changed it to a child murder, which ultimately worked better. You do eventually, by the time you get to Freddy's Dead, I think that's the first movie in the franchise that actually explicitly brings in the molestation angle. So it's you could always see it kind of there as subtext, but then they finally kind of say it in that one, which is weird because that's like the goofiest movie in the franchise, and that's the one that explicitly states it. But yeah, by just changing him into a full-on molester in this, and dropping the child murder aspect, it really makes the dream demon version of him very inconsistent and weird.
Another thing I really disliked about the movie, just in general, was when, like you're saying, he feeds on fear, right? So obviously in your horror movie, you want to scare the audience. Now, how do you think this movie scares the audience? By tension and horrific visuals and this and that? No, it's just extremely loud noises constantly. The jump scares are unreal in this movie. I had written down that they're just so fucking loud. Everything is just noise. Everything in the movie is just noise. So Freddy lacks any tension at all. You see him coming around the corner and it's just loud. It's just loud noises constantly all the way through. And jump scares, I just don't get it. I don't understand. Like, hell, I'll make a movie then. If jump scares all you need, I'll do it. Give me $35 million. I'll fucking scare you. I'll just make it so loud and make you jump in your chair.
But here's the thing. I'm by no means anti-jump scare. I think jump scares are a very important part and can be a very fun part of horror.
Sure.
The thing is, you need people who know how to do them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, these are bad jump scares because none of them work. I mean, there's nothing scary. Like, they're all super telegraphed. I don't care how loud your noise is. If you can see it coming a mile away, it's not going to get the audience. Yeah. And if it does get a certain segment of the audience, not in a way that'll stick with them or like present that, like a really good jump scare when you see it in a theater with an audience, like, like James Wan is a master at jump scares. Absolutely. And there's some other directors who can pull it off really well. You always have that moment of like the jump scare gets the audience and then you can hear the whole audience laughing at like how they were, oh my God, I can't believe they got me. But this is just like, oh yeah, there's another one. Ultimately, I think I said in Mike, the review I wrote for this, I said, like, if you want to defeat this version of Freddy, just never turn around. Because he's always there when you turn around. Yeah. That's it. Like, once you turn around, what did I say? It's just all so obvious.
I mean, I don't know. There's not much more is there more to talk about other than the performance or what?
Oh, let's see. A couple, like, what you were saying about the, like shooting itself in the foot by reminding us of the original film. Just other things like, okay, let me talk here. I'm going to shit on Samuel Bayer a little bit more.
Okay. I want to read. He was actually scheduled for next week's episode, so I mean, we
can have him on. That's fine.
Okay.
So he was asked about his version versus say the 1984 version. I'm just going to read this whole quote and then talk about like the some of the things that he does in his version. He says, "Well, I mean, I think that some of the elements. I mean, look, I think sometimes people. Yeah, that's how he starts it. I mean, look, I think sometimes people have a revisionist history. It's like, yes, they cherish this franchise, but please." I mean, look at some of the performances in the original movie. Might have looked great in 1984, and they might have looked great then, but I think that sometimes the low budget, the caliber of talent that came to the table, I think really shows itself. And I think that some of the Well, without saying anything bad about the movie, I mean, I think some of the performances border on camp. And I certainly don't want to do another, and I also think that sometimes horror movies get relegated to I call it the horror movie ghetto. Like, okay, well, that's a horror movie. The same way something's a comedy. Well, that's a low-budget comedy, and that's a horror movie, and we can't look at those movies the same way as we do with the big-budget, star-driven projects. And I've tried to tackle this movie as a real movie in a different way. It's not just a horror movie. I've tried to make it something bigger, and hopefully people will see that it appeals. I want this to appeal to diehard Nightmare fans, but I wanted to find new fans and also find people that may not necessarily be fans. All right, so first of all, obviously stuttering a lot during that, whatever. I'm not going to criticize that. He's talking like we do sometimes, but...
Like me all the time.
Ooh, I hate that attitude. That well, I mean, he's basically saying like, look, the reason I took this on is because I realized that the original movie is campy now and I can make the more serious version. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you fucker. Like...
Yeah, it's just like his ego. You know what I mean? It's just all ego.
So dismissive of the original and like of what it was doing, and this idea of like the performance of being camp when he's like, like we said, not all the performances in his are great.
No.
And then so he says that, but then you're looking at the film, and as you said, they do lift like a lot of stuff from the original, and in every case, every bit they lift is worse in this version.
Yeah.
So the ultimate example of it being the most cringy one is Freddy coming out of the wall behind Nancy's bed. Looks so great in the original because what did they do? They made a fake wall that's actually like a screen sheet, and they had the actor behind it just push up against it, and it looks so real. And of course, in this version, they do the unnecessary bloated CG version of it, where he comes out like in a full ghost form, and it looks terrible. Yeah. And it's just like, oh man, so like every time, and then the same with Chris's death. You're right that Chris's death is one of the better ones, but only because it's like replicating arguably the best death from the original. Mm-hmm. But again, so this is the zero gravity death where in both versions, whether it's Tina or Chris, she's getting tossed all around the room, flying around the room, getting thrown into the ceiling and everything. Well, the original was so cool because like they're doing it practically, right? They built that spinning room and basically had the camera stationary in the spinning room, and then you're turning the room around and the actress is flailing around, and it's just so cool. Yeah. And in this, it's so clearly fake. Like it's just all CGI enhanced, so it just doesn't have that visceral feeling to it. So yeah, it's like every time they're going back to the original, they're just like reminding you like, ooh, that was worse. And now I'm thinking about the better original film.
Yeah, I just don't. I've never understood that thinking when you're doing the remake. I understand that you maybe want to give something of a glimpse of what was before, but this one just feels, especially with that quote. Like I actually didn't see that quote, so that's really obnoxious. But yeah, you're right. So dismissive of the thing that he's completely aping, but worse. Mm-hmm. So like, what say you, Sam? I guess we'll find out next episode when he's on.
Yeah. Well, and then they ask him, if this film does well, do you think there's going to be a sequel, and would you be interested in directing it? And he says, I really hope the film does well. I will not be involved in a sequel. I don't want to have my next movie be a horror movie. Well, good news for you, Sam. Your next movie was not a horror movie because you never made another movie after this.
Yeah.
He actually says somewhere that he's like, I saw another interview where they asked him about going back to music videos, and he's like, I don't want to go back to music videos. Now I'm like, I'm like a film director. He has done nothing but music videos since this movie came out. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a couple other just brief things. Like you said the thing about how like Chris is involved in some of the better sequences and visuals. The part where she's in the classroom and everybody turns to ash, I'll give it up for that.
Yeah,
that's
sweet.
Really cool looking. Yeah. Let's see. I made a note here about how the web browser that Quentin uses is called Gigablast. I thought that was weird. That's like when the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man used Bing to look things up. Yeah, I don't have too much more. It's the doctor in the scene where they take Nancy to the hospital and are trying to give her a sedative is Judith Hoag, who is April O'Neil in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, uncredited for some reason.
Oh, shit.
If she's like some big celebrity cameo, but I thought that was a fun little thing, especially since Platinum Dunes then goes on to make Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies after this.
Oh, that is weird.
So let's talk about the man of the hour then, because I think that's the most important thing, and actually where we can start maybe being a little bit nicer, right?
Yeah, totally.
So I mentioned earlier, like the skepticism about this film is that, wow, what a Herculean task. You have to recast this iconic performance. I mean, like Freddy Krueger is Robert Englund, and Robert Englund rules. He's like, sometimes I refer to him as like kind of like a modern day Vincent Price, right? Like somebody who's like super synonymous with horror and in particular like villainous roles, but of course this one role in particular. And now it's like, wow, you have to like recast it. And there's a lot of rumors. I don't know if you noticed, Chris. There was a lot of talk at the time, and I don't know how close it came, but a big rumor that was hovering over it was Billy Bob Thornton playing Freddy Krueger, which some of these rumors I can see. Like I can picture that version of it.
Yeah, definitely.
At the time even, and now it's kind of come back. There's like a segment of the fan base that heavily advocates for Kevin Bacon as Freddy Krueger, and he's even talked about how he would be interested in that conversation. I could also see that. But when this film is coming along, it hits at just the right time where Jackie Earle Haley is having like a big career renaissance. Because Jackie Earle Haley was like a child star. People might remember he was in like the Bad News Bears and stuff, and then he like just really vanished off the scene. And then suddenly he was in a film called Little Children, where he also played a very problematic character with kids, and he was just like amazing in that. Maybe he got like an Oscar nomination. I can't remember, but it was like
I think he did actually.
Yeah, it was like a huge comeback, and then you roll into him as Rorschach in Watchmen, and obviously another fantastic performance.
Yep.
And so people online start saying, well, what about Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy? And he gets wind of that and says like, well, that's kind of cool if they're thinking to me. Yeah, maybe I'd be interested in that. And he doesn't even realize that because of that, his agents have now started to talk to the filmmakers. And they have sent them his Rorschach audition. And they see that and they're just like, this is the guy. And you know what? I will say, I think they're right. Because whatever I just, we just spent half an hour or so criticizing the movie.
Yeah.
They got the right guy to play Freddy, I think.
I agree.
He's good in this. There's a couple things that work against him we'll talk about. But performance-wise, he does nail that kind of, that level of like sinister, but still, they're not playing him as a joke machine, but he delivers the lines well. He's intimidating, even for being a small guy, right? Which is interesting because he's like a very tiny version of Freddy, but he's still scary. I like him. I think it's a shame that this didn't work and that he couldn't, try again in a better one.
I like that you mentioned his size because Robert Englund was actually a pretty big fan of the casting as well. And he talked specifically about his size, and he says, Jackie's not big, and I think that Jackie's size is going to really work. One of the metaphors I've used for Freddy is a little rabid dog that just bites your ankles and holds on. And I think Jackie brings that with his own physicality to the role without ever having to work a little bit. So, yeah like he's good. He's got a good voice. I liked the voice. I liked actually how they kind of digitally change it a little bit and kind of make it booming over the sound
system.
system.
Always like overdubbed.
I love that.
Which they do in some of the Nightmare films as well. And I think that's always good for Freddy because you're in a fake dream world, right?
Exactly.
And I can't remember when they pull him into the real world. Do they like drop that? Do they drop like the overdubbing? I think they do, right? I hope they're consistent with that.
I'm not sure actually.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I'm not going to watch it again to find out.
Yeah, no, me neither. Let's just assume that they were consistent. Let's give some sort of praise, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to assume they weren't.
But no, like he's very good. I like him a lot.
He's not England, but he doesn't have to be, right? And like he's different enough.
Nor do we want him to be England.
No.
Don't again, it's one of those things that don't remind people of what it was before. And I think he does actually a pretty damn good job at not doing that. I don't think that I was ever thinking of Robert Englund watching it. I don't think I was ever really comparing notes because he was really his own thing. I don't know if did you feel that way too? Like I really did feel he was unique enough that I wasn't constantly reminded about like.
Dude, he added his own physicality to it. He actually, and I'm going to assume this is something he came up with because it feels like one of those like actory embellishes. It's hard to kind of explain, but I really like that thing that he does where whenever he's standing and walking towards his prey, he's like doing that thing with his fingers.
Yes.
Where he's like shaking the two razor, like the two fingers together and making the razors click.
Yeah, I love that.
It's great. Yeah, it's like a very like memorable and intimidating aspect of like his version of Freddy.
And even like I didn't say in the beginning of the episode I said the bitch line. He doesn't say it at all in the movie, right?
I don't think so. No, I mean
I don't think he does.
He has some good lines. He has
some good lines, but I mean like I'm saying that's a good thing that he doesn't because again it's not aping something. Like Freddy's line is calling somebody a bitch. And it's he's not doing that in this, and he's not reminding you. But the problem with the script and the story is that inconsistency. So when he does deliver these fun lines, they're good. I like them. I like how he's doing it. But then you're constantly reminded that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Because there's like two lines in particular I always remember. I think one of them is like more in the spirit of it than the other. But I think what you're talking about is like a good example is when they do their version of the marshmallow stairs, but like Nancy's running down a hallway and the hallway just turns to blood, right? She like starts drowning in the blood, and Freddy says, "Well, how's this for a wet dream?"
How's this for a wet dream?
Great line, but you're right that it's so jokey that suddenly like, whoa, that seems really out of place here.
And especially when, again, we're dealing with a child molester. I don't know, like there's like I have a hard time laughing. Like I have a hard time really getting into the fun of it.
Like it's
so
weird because
dreary. I don't know.
It's weird because I don't think anything should be off limits in horror, and I understand that horror, a big part of horror is to make you feel uncomfortable and to confront you with horrible things. I'm not opposed to that, but you're right that there's something about this franchise to where when you take this fantastical dream killer, there should be a level of fun to it. And I think this it's the child molester thing. It's so ugly.
Yeah.
There is a sequence in this where Quentin finds Polaroids of Nancy as a little girl, and he's looking at them, and it's a scene that Kyle Gallner plays really well because you can see like, the horror on his face of what he's seeing. And then I'll actually even give it to Rooney Mara that she takes the Polaroids, and her reaction is like a brief moment of like, okay, she's trying here at least a little bit, like seeing these pictures of her as a little girl being molested, and it's like, oh, that's just so awful that I don't want it in my Nightmare on Elm Street film. Because it's like, oh, I'm not having fun anymore. This is just gross and ugly.
Yeah, it's isn't it so strange that, you know, for 25, I guess, years or 30 years of Nightmare on Elm Street before this one, you know, that's when this one came out, that we're totally fine with children getting murdered. But then as soon as you say that, you know, he molested them and didn't kill them and left them with memories of it all, and they were suppressed and they were finally coming out in their teens, it's just like, it brings it to another level. It's just so strange to us that we're totally fine with, yeah, we're having fun with this child killer. But as soon as he diddles them once, you're like, oh, fuck this movie.
Well, it's also a thing though, like I said, like narratively, it's another thing where it makes the ending feel less triumphant in a way, because when they defeat Freddy, it's like, well, they're okay, cool, they killed him again. And first of all, again, now the logic doesn't hold up as well narratively, because in the original, when she turns her back on him and says, I don't give you this power anymore, and he vanishes, it's like, okay, that's the way to defeat him. But in this, it's like, okay, so you pulled him into the real world and murdered him, but he was already murdered once. What is stopping him from coming back again? There's no reason to believe this is going to work, you know? And in fact, we get the same final jump we always do. But yeah, it also just feels less triumphant, because just because you defeated him doesn't mean you still have these horrifying repressed memories that have now come flooding back. You know, it's not like there's no catharsis to this film at the end.
No, nothing.
And that's what sucks. I did want to say the other line I was mentioning, though, the one that I think actually, this is the line I really remember, and this line is so good that I think it should have been like the tagline for the film even. Like, this is the kind of Freddy line that I could see just on a poster. It's when he pulls like, it's when he's confronting Thomas Decker's character in the boiler room, and he says, why are you screaming? I haven't even cut you yet. That's a great line.
That's a good one.
That's really good.
Oh, God. No. Just me.
What do you want from me?
I don't know, Jesse. You think you could turn back time? Answer me!
No.
Do you think you can bring the dead back to life?
No. No!
No! I didn't fucking think so.
No! No!
Why are you screaming? I haven't even cut you yet.
The other thing I think works against Jackie Earle Haley, though, is the makeup in this. So you mentioned how you don't see him very much. I'm sure that's just because the whole film is dark and ugly looking.
Yeah.
But maybe they were trying to hide that. Maybe they realized that the makeup, the design they went with is not good. And here's why. They made a decision early on to say, well, we don't want him to look like Robert Englund's Freddy, which, as we know, is right, because you said, don't remind us. But the response to that was, well, let's try and make him look like a real burn victim. So they got a bunch of photos of like real burn victims, and they said, like, well, you can't go all the way because that's just too upsetting to look at, but we'll try and find this middle ground. And they do give him more of like an actual burn victim appearance. The problem with that is that it completely robs Jackie Earle Haley of facial expressions.
Yeah.
and of like being a like projecting like emotion through like his face. And that's the great thing about Freddy. Like one of the reasons Freddy is so iconic and kind of loved, even though he's this child murderer character, is Robert Englund is able to play so much on his face and these like devilish smiles and like, kind of like the wicked humor it comes across. And Jackie Earle Haley can't do that because he's like missing a nose. He just kind of looks like a melted turtle. It's
totally.
It sucks. I don't like the look at all. When he's in silhouette just talking, it's like, this is a good version of Freddy. Then he steps into the light and you're like, no, okay. Now you're losing it a little bit.
It's funny, we were saying before, Bear was like, I want to make the Dark Knight version of Nightmare on Elm Street, right? And they actually hired the same special effects crew that they did for Two-Face.
Yeah, and you can actually see that, like the part of it, like whereas like one cheek is kind of like dissolving
Strung
or whatever.
together.
yeah, that's definitely like they're pulling that from. They probably still had like the mold from Aaron Eckhart's face, and they just like attached it to Jackie Earle Haley.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, I'm not going to, I see, okay, I won't shit on the look of him too bad. I thought it was, again, it's different. So I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it. It's just, it does suck that it doesn't allow him to emote as much. I'm not as harsh on the look of him. But again, it's the comparing, right? It's just, that's the shittiest thing about this movie is that something's better somewhere else. He's
the person I feel the worst for in this whole, like, situation.
Sure.
Because so he was signed on to do 3. Obviously they only did this one. I know Rooney Mara was signed on for a sequel. I'm sure she was thrilled she didn't have to do the second one.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. Maybe she doesn't know how to emote in real life either. Maybe not. Maybe she just like went to bed.
But I feel bad for Jackie Earle Haley because I know he was very hesitant to take this role because of like the pressure of it and everything. And then he kind of found his take and suddenly was like a little bit more excited about it. And I just feel bad because like the movie has such a bad reputation now. And I worry that he feels like, I hope he doesn't feel to blame for it because I've never really seen people go after him in this regard. No. And I do think he deserved another shot at it. I would have really liked to see him get to continue on with the character in like a better sequel or, even like another reboot or something. Just try again. Because I think they did pick the right guy for the wrong movie.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I like that actor. Every time he shows up in something, he's great. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, sometimes you just pick you bet on the wrong horse, I guess.
Well, they definitely bet on the wrong horse with the director. That's the thing. I mean, that's ultimately where a lot of this falls to.
That quote's really stuck with me, by the way. The one that you read out, he just seems so dismissive of just not even the property, but like the genre.
Yeah, I don't have the exact quotes in front of me anymore because it's been 10 years now, and I've tried to block this movie from my memory essentially. Sure. But I remember me and my friends were just recently talking about how when this came out, even in the aftermath of it, he took this like really combative stance to like the bad reaction to it. Because this movie was like really terribly critically received. I think it has like a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. And,
yeah.
And he definitely even struck more of an attitude where he was kind of attacking the horror fans, just saying like they just don't like it because it's a remake. They don't understand how smart it really is and everything. And I think that's. Why has he not made another movie since this? It's not just because this is a bad movie. I think his attitude probably got in the way.
Definitely.
This pretentious, like I know what I'm doing. I made this like misunderstood masterpiece kind of attitude. And also just the admitting he did it just for business reasons and didn't even care about the franchise or whatever. I'm sure this all plays into why he doesn't get another film after this. And imagine looking at a film like the original A Nightmare on Elm Street and saying, that's okay, but I think we should do a version where you drop that whole last act thing where we see Nancy like prepping the house Home Alone style to fight back against this demon, this like great character arc for the heroine. Now we don't need that. We don't need to like make this like amazing story of like empowerment. Let's just make this like ugly film about child molestation. But let's make sure we bring it under 90 minutes so nothing has any time to be explored. And, I don't know. It's just everything's it's bad.
And let's just make it boring. Like I think that's. I mean, you can do all those things in the movie, but it's just boring. It's really boring. Like you made a joke before, and as soon as we opened up this episode, you said about falling asleep during it. You kind of catch yourself looking at your watch quite a few times and kind of waiting for it to be done, even in 90 minutes, which is staggering to me that a movie that just cooks like this one does, this movie just keeps going and it's rushing to the end, but it still somehow feels long.
Yeah, you're never, except for, like I said, except for maybe that first 15 minutes or so, you're after that, you never feel invested again.
No.
I think once you lose Chris, I think Chris's death is like the drop off point.
Well, and again, and you're left with Rooney Mara. So Bayer describes Nancy as the loneliest girl in the world. Okay. and Rooney Mara says her character describes her as a socially awkward and timid and really doesn't know how to connect with people. Now, how the fuck does your character connect to your audience?
Yep.
And at that point, it's over. If that's the characterization that your director and your main star are taking with the protagonist of the movie, the hero of the movie, I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, there was a point where I was watching this and I was just thinking, like, Quentin, just get away from this girl. Like, it's just not worth it. Just you know, you have some charisma. You can do better. Like, just and again, I know, like, yes, character wise, they went through horrible stuff. There's a reason the character is that way, but that doesn't forgive how the audience can't attach to it. Then
it was so silly too. Like when they find out that they were, because the movie does this weird thing where it's like maybe they weren't molested. You know,
we didn't even talk about that. Like how much time the movie wastes on like maybe he was innocent. It's like who cares? He's murdering people in dreams now.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's such a throwaway thing.
Yeah, like if it turns out he's innocent, what does that change here? Like,
nothing.
Like he's
literally nothing. So it's like a really stupid plot point. But when they discover that they were molested, there's like no reaction. They take it pretty well. Which was so strange to me. They just take it pretty well.
I'm thinking now, I would almost start, maybe they should, like, because we were just saying it wouldn't change anything. Like, there's a part of me that thinks maybe they should have just said he was actually innocent, because then it wouldn't, like, change it too much.
It's
but
funny
at least
you say
now,
that.
in retrospect, you could have this, like, it's like a commentary even before the case of, like, cancel culture. So, you know, it's like, you could act like the movie's smarter than it is.
It's funny you say that because it was actually the original ending. It was, I think they changed it, they changed it a lot, but anyways.
Yeah, I sometimes I like to give someone involved like the last word, and we've read quotes from multiple people now. So let's the other main cast member, Thomas Dekker. I have a quote from him that I think kind of sums it up. So they asked him years later about his experience making the film, and he said, "It's a tricky one to talk about. I would say it's an honor to be a part of it. I think the cast, as we know, we had two now one-time Oscar nominee and another two-time Oscar nominee, who's still a very good friend of mine, Rooney Mara. And I think the issue at hand with that movie can't really be thrown at the director because the director was basically a gun for hire to make it look good. And he did that. It looked great. Okay, so I'm going to come in and say I disagree.
Yeah.
And I think when you're saying that the director is a gun for hire, you can throw it at the director. Yeah. But then he goes on to say, it's basically like most good films tell a story. That film was to sell a tuxedo. It's a sales movie. It's okay. We got this idea we're going to take and we're going to make money off of it. So let's just do that. Even though the intentions of the artistic forces behind it were like, okay, we're going to open up the mythology of Freddy Krueger. We're going to make him darker and actually explore the idea of child sexual abuse. And those are all the things that interested me. Of course, at the end of the day, when you have to put it in 1,000 theaters or more, you have to shy away from those things and just make it a sellable entity. So I think you can't really start judging the leaves of a tree if the seed is fucked." So that's basically him saying, this original script had some interesting ideas, but the studio balked, everybody was afraid to push that idea as far as it should or could go, and you just end up with this like hodgepodge of interesting concepts introduced and dropped, bad reminders of the original film, and unlikable characters. Not a recipe for success. So the film makes money, but nobody likes it, and the sequel talk of this one dropped off almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like it's not. This isn't even like we talked about like with Friday the 13th, where multiple sequel scripts were like commissioned and stuff. I'm sure they probably had a little like initial attempt at it, but I don't think that there was ever any like serious attempt on this one to go forward.
Well, and that kind of like where does this go from here? Like it's been 10 years now since we've had an Elm Street movie. Like where does it go? What do we like? The Craven estate owns everything, right? Like they own the domestic rights and the majority of all the decision making for it, right? That's what they own.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you saw this, Chris, but I have a lot of optimism for where A Nightmare on Elm Street could go right now, simply because of a couple factors. First of all, Robert Englund has recently cooled on. He's now being a little bit more vocal about how he does want to play Freddy one more time. For a long time, he was kind of dismissive of it and saying, "No, I'm too old. I feel like I've done my tenure with that character." And he's now, probably because of how there's like this big nostalgia push in filmmaking in general, he probably sees like the potential of coming back for like one big final hurrah.
And he probably sees a check too. Let's be honest.
Oh, for sure, yeah. For a long time, he was trying to push a prequel film where he would play the human version of Freddy Krueger and showing him as the child murderer in Springwood. I was never super into that idea. I don't think it's needed or necessary, but I'm all for him coming back for one more film. As you said, the Craven estate owns it. So basically, whoever wants to make a new Friday the 13th film, it's going to have to like pitch themselves to them, right?
Right.
Well, there's two things at play here. First of all, Elijah Wood's company, Spectrovision, who is people will know is doing Mandy, Color Out of Space, Daniel Isn't Real. They're very interested in Nightmare on Elm Street. Elijah Wood has said it's a property that they've been looking at. They have their idea for takes on it. Elijah Wood was recently interviewed about it, and he basically said that he feels because of the Robert Englund of it all, he said, you almost have to push forward without Freddy. But he said, he's like, I think what you do is you make a first film with Robert Englund as Freddy, and then you do something to kind of change the narrative to where sequels after that could go on without him. So I'm imagining that would be like a passing the torch thing where a new killer kind of takes over. The other person who says they have a killer pitch for a Nightmare on Elm Street that they don't want to share publicly, but have said they're super excited about it and they really hope they get in the room, is Mike Flanagan.
Yes.
And I have to imagine that pitch is probably awesome, and I would be down for Mike Flanagan doing a Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, if you have probably the best person working in horror right now saying he's interested, hear that pitch out, please.
Yep, absolutely. He's actually, you said he's probably the best guy working right now for horror. Him and James Wan, I would say, for sure.
Yeah.
But Flanagan is a master at this point. Everything he's doing, I'm just eating up. So I would love that. It's funny you mentioned that right now because before the podcast, I was just, setting some stuff up for editing later, right? And I was watching, I dropped the trailer stuff in. And I was watching the trailer for Elm Street being like, wait a second, was this all just like filmed before and they never, they just used it for marketing? No, there is an actual concept trailer out there that somebody's built around Flanagan. Like, it looks like something he would have made. And it looks pretty great. And it's definitely focused around children too. So like, that's kind of interesting. Again, it's just a concept trailer, so it's not like it was his idea or anything. Yeah. But I think anything that Flanagan touches at this point is just amazing. Like, I just finished Bly Manor, and I know he only directed the first episode, but he's definitely the showrunner on that, and it definitely feels like his baby still. You know what I mean? Like, he is awesome. I know everybody slept on Dr. Sleep, but me and you both love that movie. So. Give him everything. Yeah, I would say if like he could work on it, and then like I said, and I think even if Spectrovision can be involved because they're really smart with what they're doing too, and Elijah Wood is like a huge horror nerd, and I feel like you'd feel like it's in good hands with him for sure. I think there's potential here. I do think they need to hurry up if they want Robert Englund to be involved. But this certainly doesn't have the same legal hurdles that Friday the 13th has. So I would say whoever should be having these conversations, hopefully they're having them now because it has been 10 years. I think enough time has passed from the memory of this one that I think, well, maybe not right now because who knows what's going on with movies. But, 2022 maybe or something is a good time maybe to get a new one out. So here's hoping something happens soon. Well, it's funny. I read, too, there was rumors of pitches being made to HBO Max, to like do a series for it. Yeah, which I could see also. I'd be down with that. This can definitely work as a series as well, yeah. Again, you have such an interesting concept, and I know we bagged on this movie enough, but it's such a wildly imaginative property, and it's a shame that wasn't done in this one. It makes no sense why it wasn't. You can do fucking anything. You've created a world where there are no rules, really. I mean, there's some rules, but it's like even the old Freddy movies screw around with the rules too. Hell, the first movie does. So you have such an interesting property that just get the right person involved that wants to do something. So I actually think that Elijah Wood stuff would be great. He definitely would respect the stuff, but he seems like they'd be, again, imaginative about it and take chances and. Again, add that fun, that flair. That's something that modern day filmmaking would really, really benefit this series. Yeah, I think that's you just need these people. I think Flanagan and Elijah Wood would respect the original, and respect the franchise in a way that it needs. I have some this doesn't often happen, Chris, but I have some late breaking
additions to our discussion here.
Oh, okay.
I recruited a friend of mine to. I was asking him, "Do you remember all the dumb stuff Samuel Bayer said about this movie when he was making it?" Mm-hmm. And I've got some information here. So apparently, in a review of the Blu-ray of this remake, this reviewer says that there's a featurette on there called Freddy Krueger Reborn. It's a 14-minute featurette. It says, A Nightmare on Elm Street's one and only traditional featurette is pretty much 14 minutes of, and this is our spin on it. The whole thing opens by complaining about the lack of mythology in the original Elm Streets and how Freddy has no motivation for hunting down the children of Springwood, which seems kind of incorrect to me, but whatever. And then on the audio commentary, Bayer is quoted as saying, or no, I'm not sure this is from the audio commentary, but he's doing some other interview and he says, look, I'm going to catch a lot of heat for this, but some of these fans on the web should just get up, stretch, breathe, go outside and get some fresh air, maybe get a girlfriend and just get a life.
Oh, God.
They should see the movie and make up their own minds. So yeah, fuck this guy.
Yeah.
Bring in Flanagan, bring in Elijah Wood, get England back, and let's go one more time on this. And I do think, like you said, you were just talking about like the imagination behind this franchise. I do think this franchise can live beyond beyond Freddy. I think it'll be tough. I think that's why you do need England to be involved one more time. I do think you need that passing of the torch. This is another debate you and I have about Indiana Jones, how you don't believe anyone else can do it other than Harrison Ford. And I say I do think someone, but as you know, I've always maintained that you need Harrison Ford in that film as like the bookends, right? He needs to be old Indiana Jones, and you need to flash back to the new actor. In that same way, you need Robert Englund as Freddy, and then something happens in the film where a new like dream demon is established. And then maybe you can maybe I don't know, maybe it's a female, villain or something. Do something.
Oh, Paul Feig just got goosebumps just now. Paul Feig's hire me. I'm gonna get funny women, scary women, but they're gonna be funny.
But maybe that's what it takes, right? I think you have to go in a very drastically different direction with the villain.
Francine Krueger. Right. Sorry.
He has a daughter established in the franchise. Maybe she can come in.
Yeah. Does she like wonton soup? Yeah. I would. Yeah. I mean, the problem with the bookend thing about bringing him back is that, again, it's that reminder. Is it not that reminder that's going to fuck with people?
No, I think it's necessary in this one, though, because it's not just... It's unlike this one. See, the problem is here you're reminding people of a different continuity that's better. But if he's back, then you're reminding people of like, oh, this is a continuation of the story I already like. That's so
kind of like Leonard Nimoy showing up in Star Trek 2009.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I think like that gave that movie like
credibility.
Gave it like credibility. Yeah. Right. It needed that to like bridge that. Like you could feel like, okay, you're not just dismissing the original continuity. You're saying this is just an offshoot of it, and to show it like here's a bit of that original continuity. I think that was important, and I think it would play the same way here.
I kind of just want Robert Englund like as Freddy sitting in like a chair with like a cognac, like and tapping his claws at the cognac while telling you the story of something. That'd be fun.
I mean, honestly, anytime he straps the glove on and puts the makeup on, it's great,
Yeah.
Except maybe with the exception of Dream Child, where you can tell in that one he feels a little less invested. But other than that, he is awesome, and that's the thing. It's he is this franchise, and he will always be a part of it, and I would like to see him be a part of it one more time. So yeah, that's it for that. I can't really say I'm happy I revisited this film. It was fun to talk about, but of everything we've watched so far, this is definitely my least favorite.
Interesting.
I look at this one, I'm just like, yeah, I'm glad there's no other than the Jackie Earle Haley of it all. I'm glad this never got any sequels. I totally understand why this failed, because it did fail. I mean, I'm sorry, it made a lot of money, but when nobody likes it and nobody's even talking about a sequel the next week, you fucked up.
Yeah. you done goofed.
You done goofed. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, that's a place to leave it there, I guess. I hope you guys enjoyed our
Halloween spectacular shitting on a horror film, but
go watch Bly Manor if you haven't already.
Tons of, or go watch the 1984 Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
Go watch a movie that was so good it actually spawned many sequels.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. We will not be talking about those movies in this podcast.
No. But what we will be talking about soon, Chris, do you want to preview our November episodes?
Yes. So we're keeping with a theme of sorts, but our first episode of November is going to be Judge Dredd, the Sylvester Stallone epic. I'm just kidding. I've never seen it, so I have no idea. But we're gonna be watching that and reviewing that one, so follow along. And then the next one after that will be the. I don't want to spoil what I think about it, so I'm not gonna say. But Dread, the Carl Urban awesome movie. I guess I just spoiled it. But anyway, we're gonna we're gonna watch that one. So yeah. I'm actually. It's been a couple years since I've seen that one, and I've never seen Judge Dredd, so it's gonna be kind of a fun comparison for me to do.
I think it's going to be super fascinating to talk about those two movies. Like, we're not doing one episode about both of them, but just to, when we get to the second one, to compare and contrast. Because here we have two attempts to adapt a comic book character, both of which didn't do well enough to get sequels, but are also just so tonally different.
Right.
It's going to be pretty... I'm really looking forward to doing both those. And I'm certainly looking forward to revisiting both of them as well. I mean, I have differing thoughts about the two of them, but sure. I'm looking forward to sitting down and rewatching both.
Definitely. Well, if you want to hear more, obviously subscribe, please. You can follow us on Twitter at F2FPod, at F2FPod on Twitter, Instagram, all the socials. Just Google it if you want. Rate and review. Go to Apple, iTunes, all that, Apple Podcasts. That's the best way to do it. Anything helps, please.
Smash that like button on YouTube. I just want to say that because I love when people say that.
Follow Trev's OnlyFans.
Yeah,
Smash
I'm selling feet pictures.
Oh, God. Yeah, so like us there, like us everywhere.
There you
know
go.
What I'm saying?
Yep. All right, catch you next time.
Okay, see ya.